What's up, homie?
Eleanor? You broke John, you.
Hello, welcome to my super secret channel, Mind for Story. Today I want to look at persistence in Chapter 4 of The Good Place. I'm going to spoil everything, not on purpose, but if you haven't watched The Good Place in its entirety, please just pause, go watch the show. You can always come back later.
I know you were a Buddhist monk and kept a vow of silence. Would you prefer to remain silent here as well?
Since arriving in The Good Place, Jason has shown actually a lot of persistence up till this point. He has remained silent and has been responding to a name that isn't his own, and he continues to conduct himself in a manner that is, again, not like his own personality.
I sold fake drugs to college kids.
When Eleanor asks Jason what he did for a job or, for work, Jason first answers with a string of things that clearly don't pay money, like amateur DJ and the like. And then when she rephrases the question, asks what he did for money, he tells her he sold fake drugs to college kids. And that reminded me of a scene from Loser, when I believe it was the main character found somebody's date rape drugs, and they switched them with ginkgo biloba. And the girls in the bar, and then, in the scene when they're supposed to be really out of it, instead they're studying. And then, sort of versus, I'm remembering another scene, or sort of storyline from, I believe it was a TV show, but I can't remember which one, when a character wanted to get beer for a party, and all they could get was non-alcoholic beer. But the students didn't know that, these high schoolers didn't know that, and they were drinking it and acting completely wasted. So, with thinking about these two sort of different fake drug and alcohol sort of stories, I was wondering if these college kids that Jason was selling to, if maybe they had placebo effect and thought that the drugs worked, so it was kind of like he did, give them what they wanted, kind of, but not really, or if they felt nothing and knew that they'd been tricked. Because I kind of see, it's almost better for them if they got the placebo effect, I would think, because then it feels like they didn't just, one, just completely get tricked, and two, because if they know they were tricked, then they're kind of trapped in the situation wherein they can't really do anything about it, because they can't report it without revealing that they were trying to get drugs, and they can't necessarily, go after Jason, because if they do anything to him and there's there's police involvement, again, it might come up that they were trying to get drugs. It's sort of just something, I don't know why I've been very curious about this. While I'm on the topic, because my mind has been thinking all of these sort of storylines through, I'm just going to put out a quick reminder. Don't leave your drinks unattended when you're out. Because I feel like it's one thing to make a choice for yourself, and it's a completely other thing for that to have that choice made for you. And please remember, there are still consequences to your actions when you are under the influence of something. I want to loop back, though, just real quick, to Jason's original answer to Eleanor's question when he's listing off those, being an amateur DJ, an amateur, I think, backup dancer, and body spray maker. Eleanor discredits those because they don't make money, which is its own thing I have my own problem with. But I want to address that these were activities Jason remained persistent in pursuing throughout his life, and he did them even though they didn't make money, because he loved them. Now, he did the fake drug dealing because it ended up being a practical means to an end. It was how he was able to pay for being alive, but he didn't seem very enthusiastic about it when he told Eleanor. And I think this really does summarize how many people feel about what they do to pay for being alive. Now that Eleanor realizes she's not the only one who doesn't belong in the good place, she lets herself voice that she would like a space where she could just be herself. And this leads to a whole new problem for her because Jason has a long held personal belief in being himself. But when he says it, what he seems to mean is, I want to do whatever I want and call it being myself. And this turns into Eleanor really having to try and keep Jason in check now that she knows. And now that he's heard her say that, because he starts wanting to act like himself, to prevent them from both being found out as frauds. And I think this is, I actually think this particular conflict is integral in pushing Eleanor's persistence in trying to be a better person.
I read this entire David Hume book, and then I read it again because I didn't understand it the first time, and now I'm ready to go.
Jason's lack of concern and, care in the moments reminds Eleanor that there's a reason she wants to change, and that it's worth the work of reading a challenging book twice, to really work on her comprehension of the material. And being herself doesn't need to mean causing problems for others or being selfish. She can be a new self, and she tries to persuade Jason to adopt this idea of being a newer, better self too.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness and hard work. I could not have done this without you.
Tahani has been helping plan the big opening for Chef Patricia's restaurant. And Chef Patricia is a very intense person.
Of course, the more the merrier.
This is supposed to be a trait that it's there regardless of how Chef Patricia actually feels in the moment, which makes some moments harder to determine if she really is okay, if she's really as happy as she's supposed to be. Like when Tahani asks if they can add one more person to the guest list, and it's not very clear if she's actually okay with that addition or not. I see this as a point against persistence because it's creating some communication challenges, this continued tone of voice and demeanor that Chef Patricia has. And it might be a good way to determine if you should persist in a particular way. Like, is it leading to confusion, or do others continue to understand your intent? So it might be one way to determine in your life whether or not persistence is working for you.
You're both helping Gianni to regain his confidence to be able to speak again as a surprise from me.
And you know what? I think it makes sense that Tahani would make this sort of assumption. I know in the past, when I've watched this scene, I saw it as played to show how self-involved Tahani is. I think maybe that's still sort of how Chidi and Eleanor might interpret it. But when I think about it, Tahani is supposed to be surrounded by people who care about others' feelings. One, Eleanor knows that Jianyu's silence has been hard for Tahani. Two, and now Jianyu has spoken after spending time with Eleanor and Chidi. So I do see how it makes sense for her to jump to that conclusion. And I think personally that it's lovely that Tahani is assigning these sort of attributes to these people and assuming the best in them, that they would care enough about her, even though they're, newer to each other, that they would all try to do something to make her happy.
Chef Patricia has recreated each person's favorite meal on earth.
Later, when we're at the actual, restaurant opening, the big launch, Tahani makes this announcement. So it's interesting because sharing a meal with others is something we often do to celebrate and to really just enjoy each other in real life. But I've been to hundreds of meals throughout my life that were not set up to accommodate, my particular dietary restrictions and the like, which led, instead of me feeling like I'm part of the group, it led to me feeling sort of alienated. And that's sort of like, that's where this is about to go, is it's not so much that Eleanor or Jason feel alienated, they're more just annoyed by how this turns out. But, I think about sort of the symbolic value that food and taking meals sort of has throughout The Good Place. Like how right at the beginning of the very first show, like the first season, Eleanor hogs the shrimp that first night, and then the next morning they fly through the air. This is all about how selfish Eleanor is. Later, when she's, got her second chance at being alive, and she tries to be vegetarian, and we see her friends react to that. Or the amount of struggle Chidi experiences trying to choose food. And a lot of that has to do with moral implications, like with I think the blueberry muffins, after he hears about, there's some sort of ethical issue with how the blueberries are, maybe the farm workers. I can't quite remember what the issue was. But, it was very much a sign of Chidi wanting to make all the right choices in the moment. And it came down to even feeding himself. Or the evolution Tani sort of undergoes once she gets to the Good Place. And she makes a point of learning how to do all these different things. And she throws her own farewell party. And rather than having, all the food stocked by asking Janet to make the food happen, she has made all the food. Because it mattered to her that she'd be able to do those things and then to share it with others by that point. So anyways, if you get back to just what's happening right here in this episode, where we've got, what's supposed to be this big event where everybody's about to get their favorite meal from their life, this should and could be a wonderful bonding moment for all the characters, where they could, share about themselves and these, memories. But it was set up largely to disappoint Eleanor and Jason.
According to our files, your favorite meal was the hunger strike you went on to protest Bolivian sex trafficking.
I chose to imagine being in Jason's position when it's revealed that Eleanor was served a plate of nothing. And did that because, in this moment, Jason, or I guess me, I'm sort of mad at Eleanor for not wanting me to be myself right after it kind of feels like she said that we should all be ourselves, or that's my takeaway from our conversation. And I don't like pretending to be someone I'm not, especially Jianyu, who eats tofu. And I want to order something I like to eat, so I'm going to, and I don't see why Eleanor doesn't just ask for something she wants to eat too. I mean, this whole thing could be easily fixed if she just asked for what she wanted, and I'm going to ask for jalapeno poppers. So yeah, after thinking about it, I feel like Jason does see things exactly as they are, while also missing all the underlying sort of meaning of each and every choice Eleanor has to make here. Because he's right, she could just ask for something she wants to eat, just like he could. Except the context of the situation complicates that, and asking for something else in this moment could reveal them, as frauds. So to stop Jason from speaking in front of people here at this restaurant, Eleanor punches Chef Patricia's cake, which rips a sinkhole in the ground under the restaurant, of course. In this sinkhole, later, Tani sees it get bigger. And I had to wonder, just for a little bit, why she would go and investigate someone else's establishment in this scenario. And I've considered it could be a sense of a feeling of co-ownership because of how involved she's been in the opening and is now involved in the reopening that's being planned. Except she also then doesn't go and tell anyone that she saw the hole get bigger. She doesn't say anything until, the next episode when Michael is fretting already over the sinkhole not sealing itself. But I think really what this is Tani wanted to have good news to go and tell people, because she has an ongoing sort of idea or belief that if she is the one to spread good news, she's the one to tell people something that is good, then it's practically as good as doing the good thing herself. So that's sort of where I've landed at this point. You tell me in the comments if there is a more obvious and practical reason why she went and looked into Chef Patricia's restaurant here.
Yo, you should listen to me. I came up with hundreds of plans in my life, and only one of them got me killed.
Even though Jason's last idea in his life resulted in him dying, he still is under the impression that he has a lot of good ideas. Which brings me around to the big question, which is, when is persistence good and when is it a problem? Because on the surface, Jason just wanting to be himself doesn't sound bad. Jason having ideas doesn't sound bad. Except that his ideas are often bad, with consequences that impact more people than just himself. And one of those bad ideas, is him just being himself. Again, because he thinks being himself means doing whatever he wants without thinking about it first. And I think the answer to the question, when is persistence good and when is it a problem? I think the answer, or part of the answer, is feedback. And I know feedback like the kind Jason is getting from Eleanor right now is particularly hard to take. Ideally, if you're receiving harsh feedback, you can assess the source when you're deciding what to do with that feedback, or how you want to respond to that feedback. So feedback, and I think the other thing may be outcomes. Like, Jason died from his last big idea. That should matter in considering whether or not to stand by his current feelings on the matter of whether or not he has lots of good ideas. And Jason originally rejects the feedback because it doesn't feel good. But feeling good can't be a person's only guidepost. So my wish for everyone who is, you're struggling with deciding whether persistence or change is the right next step for you, is just lots of good guideposts, lots of good and trustworthy sources of feedback that you can turn to ask what they think, and an ability to honestly assess your own previous outcomes. So that's really where I'm at after thinking about persistence, as I've seen in, chapter 4. But you tell me, are there other really helpful ideas or things that you've done in choosing whether or not to persist or change in your life? You can let me and anyone else who's curious know in the comments. And I hope you have a great day.
This is my butthole. It's just like a hole where me and my buds can hang out.
Oh, bud hole.